Buenas tardes. Empezamos esta sesión y quiero, obviamente, agradecer al Smart City World Congress la oportunidad que nos da a todos para poder encontrarnos, compartir conocimiento y no solo ayudar a compartir y a crear ese conocimiento, sino también a difundirlo, a propagarlo y a intentar conseguir que a partir de él mejoren nuestras ciudades, mejoren nuestros entornos. También agradecer, obviamente, a los ponentes que hoy nos acompañan y que van a compartir con nosotros su visión sobre la pregunta y la cuestión que hoy nos ha reunido en esta sala. Simplemente un comentario muy breve para no robarles a ellos tiempo. Hoy en día todos somos conscientes y creo que todos conocemos de forma bastante precisa que nos encontramos involucrados en un muy intenso y acelerado proceso de desplazamiento de la población humana desde el campo a las ciudades. Y a diferencia de cómo sucedía en otros tiempos, no es un desplazamiento voluntario, no es un desplazamiento para conseguir más oportunidades, sino que es un desplazamiento obligatorio, expulsados del campo. Gran parte de la población del mundo se está desplazando a las ciudades. Eso nos está planteando, e insisto, ya forma parte de lo que sabemos, no de las hipótesis, un crecimiento imparable de las ciudades, sobre todo de aquellas ciudades que no han constituido lo que hoy llamamos el primer mundo, crecimiento que en pocos años va a llevarnos a tener más población en las ciudades que fuera de ellas, que en los campos, crecimiento que si proyectamos hasta el año 50 nos enfrenta a una paradoja. Si hoy en día ya difícilmente nuestro mundo puede sostener el consumo energético y de recursos que estamos haciendo, ese mundo en el que se habrá completado ese desplazamiento de las ciudades alrededor del año 50, requeriría entre 4 y 5 planetas para poderse sostener. Es decir, estamos inevitablemente frente a un reto que probablemente quedó bien descrito en Out of Africa, en el libro que todos conocemos de Isaac Dines, cuando afirmaba que cuando los dioses quieren castigar a alguien, lo que hacen es permitirle realizar sus sueños. Nuestras ciudades, las actuales, y esas ciudades que están creciendo en todo el mundo a partir de nuestro modelo, en realidad responden a nuestros sueños, a los sueños del pasado. Son la concreción presente de sueños del pasado. Y sin otros sueños no tendremos ciudades nuevas. Seguramente el reto que tenemos aquí, el reto al que llamamos Smart City, es construir un nuevo sueño que sí que sea posible, que se convierta en un mejor entorno para todos nosotros y no en una pesadilla y no en el castigo de los dioses por haber soñado, por haber querido vivir bien. Ese deseo, esa necesidad de un nuevo sueño, de un nuevo entorno, es el que nos ha planteado o nos ha llevado a formular esta mesa, este encuentro, y a concretarlo a partir de una pregunta muy breve, sencilla, pero suficientemente ambiciosa como para permitir despertar, generar esos sueños. As the population living in the cities is still increasing, how can we achieve more sustainable urban environments while keeping their vibrancy and their liveability? ¿Cómo conseguimos que ciudades que están en crecimiento y que van a seguir creciendo puedan a la vez conseguir un modelo más sostenible y sin perder capacidad de vida, sin perder intensidad, sin perder habitabilidad? Para contestar a esa pregunta y a partir de esas respuestas intentar ir formulando ese nuevo sueño, ese nuevo modelo al que llamamos ciudad inteligente, Smart City, tenemos hoy aquí a Melanie from San Francisco Department of Environment, Pieter van Heyningen from Stellenbosch Innovation District, School of Public Leadership, Stellenbosch University, Lluís Bullivant, founder of Edition in Chief, y finalmente Maria Aiolova, from Terreform One, co-founder and director of education. Ellos serán quienes nos van a formular su visión sobre esta pregunta. Empezamos por Melanie Nutter. Melanie.
Good afternoon. My name is Melanie Nutter. I'm the director of the San Francisco Department of the Environment. We're a city agency in San Francisco that is responsible predominantly for the city's sustainability programs. So everything from zero waste to energy efficiency to renewable energy, many programs that I'd like to detail for all of you today. My perspective is really from the policy perspective. So because I'm not in the planning department and I'm not an architect, really what I'm going to focus on today is the policies and programs that cities can run to ensure a sustainable future as well as livability for our residents. So first and foremost, why do cities care? And why does this whole question of sustainability really matter? Our global challenge, as many of you probably have already heard today, is that cities comprise about 2% of the world's landmass, yet are responsible for 75% of the planet's carbon emissions. So that means that cities are both a big part of the problem, but have to be part of the solution. And the perspective I want to bring you today is from San Francisco, California. For those of you who haven't been there, we have a population of about 800,000 people. And we're located on a peninsula that is 7 miles by 7 miles wide, or 11 kilometers by 11 kilometers. And because we're surrounded by water on 3 sides, we are at particular risk for sea level rise and other impacts from climate change. This is a picture of our downtown. As I mentioned, we're particularly vulnerable to sea level rise. In this picture, you'll see our financial district, our piers, that's part of our port, as well as a number of residential communities in San Francisco. This is what we hope is not the future for San Francisco. This is a model of what areas would be underwater with a 1 meter sea level rise. That is a conservative estimate of what we could be facing in San Francisco by the year 2100. Under a do-nothing scenario, we would see $46 billion in damage to our infrastructure, and about 90 miles of roadways throughout the Bay Area would be flooded. So the good news is we are making progress in San Francisco. We have done a carbon emissions inventory in 2010 that looked at where our carbon comes from and how much we've been able to reduce since 1990, which is our benchmark. And the good news is we are at 14.5% below 1990 levels as of 2010. That is double the Kyoto Protocol, but it is far away from our ultimate goal, which is to reduce our carbon by 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. And this slide also shows what are the main sectors where our carbon is coming from. This is very common for many cities. It's really 3 sources. One is buildings, the other one is transportation, and the third is waste. So how have we gotten to the 14.5% below 1990 level number? First and foremost, we are focusing on reducing our fossil fuel dependence in San Francisco. Over the past decade, our policymakers closed 2 fossil fuel powered plants that were located within the city and county of San Francisco. This was damaging not only to our air quality as well as bad for carbon emissions, it was very detrimental to the diverse community that lives around these power plants. So by closing them, it had both an environmental benefit as well as a health benefit, improving the livability for those citizens. On the energy front, we are also focusing on reducing energy demand, or what we call shrinking the energy demand pie. This is really where we're spending a lot of our energy, reducing energy use in buildings. And the picture here is from one of our key programs called Energy Watch. It's a rebate program that we run working with small businesses to provide them rebates to install retrofits to their business. This helps them both save money on their energy bill as well as reduce carbon. Over the past 3 years, we've served 4,000 businesses, and on average, they're saving about $4,500 every year on their bills. So again, both an economic benefit as well as an environmental benefit. And we have very ambitious goals as it comes to renewable energy. Once we're focused on reducing the energy demand and all of our energy efficiency programs, we want green energy in San Francisco. And our previous mayor, Mayor Gavin Newsom, set a goal of achieving 100% renewable energy by 2030. So that is a goal that we're striving for. Here you'll see our local energy map that is online, and it shows about 4,000 solar installations that have been put in San Francisco. That's about 23 megawatts of solar energy. And this is a great online tool that any resident or business can use, put in their address, and they can find out what the solar potential is of their home, as well as rebates that they can access. So these types of technology tools have really helped us increase solar in San Francisco. And as you all know, as I mentioned, inefficient buildings waste energy, and that's why we have a robust green buildings program. And what this green building program has done is really two things. Back in 1999, we passed one of the first green building policies in the country, requiring LEED Silver certification for all municipal projects as of 2004, and requiring LEED certification for all municipal projects in 2011. For those of you who are not from the United States, the LEED certification is our version of setting standards and certification for buildings who have gone above and beyond for energy efficiency, water conservation, and renewable energy. So that's one thing that we've done, and we right now have 63 municipal projects in San Francisco that have achieved LEED certification or are currently doing that. A second policy that I'll mention is called the Existing Commercial Building Ordinance, and it requires that all commercial buildings that are 10,000 square feet or larger need to report their energy use and that data to the city, with the idea that transparency and sharing that data, that will help to inspire the property managers and property owners to take action when they can see what measures they could take to reduce their energy use as well as save money on their energy bill. And we just yesterday announced a partnership with City Zenith, who is going to help us turn all of this data that we're collecting into something that's useful to the public. So this is an initial mock-up of what we could do with 5D technology, showing which buildings are energy hogs and which buildings are energy savers. And again, this is a tool that we hope both property managers as well as the public will use to continue to drive retrofits in the commercial building sector. And speaking of green building, we know that wasting resources is short-sighted, and that's why we also have a commercial and demolition ordinance that requires any 65% or more of our construction demolition waste needs to be diverted from the landfill. And we've expanded that idea of not wasting resources as it comes to our garbage collection program to a goal that we've set to achieve zero waste by 2020. Again, the good news is San Francisco is diverting 80% of our waste from the landfill, and we don't incinerate any of our waste. That's all through recycling and composting. And this program, we like to say, is a leader in the US in showing how you can have an easy-to-use program, financial incentives, and outreach and education to help to divert from the landfill. And speaking of our zero waste program, we also want to make sure that although those waste programs are helping to keep some litter off the streets, we obviously don't want concrete jungles, and we want to focus on livability. So we have an urban forest program where we are focusing on ensuring that all of the trees that are planted in San Francisco are both on public and private property and are giving us multiple benefits, whether it's cleaning our air, whether it's helping to sequester carbon, or providing habitat for local wildlife. And this is another online tool that we've used called the Urban Forest Map. Individual residents and businesses can track all of the trees in their neighborhood to find out what type of tree it is, what sort of care it needs. But then this map also shows what the macro benefits are of our 90,000 trees that are in our urban forest. And again, like many cities, when we're thinking about livability, we want to reduce traffic. San Francisco is the second densest city after New York in the US, so that means we do see a lot of traffic in our city. And how are we going about combating that? We are a transit-first city, which means that we prioritize investments in our public transit system, as well as in supporting biking and walking as alternative modes of transportation. On the public transportation front, we have about 300 electric-powered trolley buses. And the reason that's significant from an environmental perspective is all of our municipal power comes from our Hetch Hetchy Dam, which is hydroelectric power, so it's greenhouse gas emissions free. And all of the buses that actually are powered with fuel are on biofuels, anywhere from B5 to B20. This is just another tool that we have in San Francisco. This is coming pretty common now, but it's called the Next Bus app, and it shows when the next bus is coming. So it helps people to find that next bus, find that next train, and be that much closer to making the decision to take public transit instead of a car. And also, like many cities in Europe, we have a bike boom going on in San Francisco. Bike ridership is up 40% over the past 5 years, and that's really because of the investments that we've made in expanding our bike lanes and infrastructure. We right now have 250 miles of bike lane infrastructure within the 49 miles of San Francisco. That's really been helping to increase the biking in our city. And although we focus on transit first, if you do need a single occupancy vehicle, we support electric vehicles. And we're working to become the electric vehicle capital of the US. We have installed about 80 public charging stations at 20 locations. That's on public property. And there are about 200 charging stations throughout the city and county of San Francisco. This charging infrastructure also is providing us very valuable feedback about how many electric vehicles are using the public stations and where we will put the future stations for our public infrastructure. This is a parking app that was created in San Francisco called SF Park. So whether you're an electric vehicle or a traditional vehicle, this app helps you find a parking space. And this is significant, again, from a livability perspective because it reduces congestion. And we have stats that show about 30% of congestion in San Francisco comes from circling, looking for a parking space. So having this kind of information has been really useful to reducing traffic congestion in the downtown corridor. And the few apps that I've shown today are, of course, enabled by our commitment to open data. We have about 500 data sets that have been posted from the municipal government, and about 60 different apps have been created on this platform. And although we're at a Smart Cities conference and technology is a great enabler for a lot of our sustainability policies and programs, nothing beats the power of dialogue in San Francisco. Although we are focusing on the newest and coolest technology, and we certainly want to be doing that, we are also continuing to focus on traditional methods like grassroots outreach and dialogue, talking with our citizens one-on-one about how they can help make San Francisco a more sustainable city, as well as listening to them of what they really need from their city government. So just in closing, we're about to launch our climate action strategy. It's an update to our climate action strategy. And we've really boiled down all of what you heard today into a 3-point solution for our residents and our businesses. And that's 0, 50, 100. We're asking all residents and businesses, as well as city agencies, to do 3 things. Work in their lives to achieve zero waste as close as they can, get out of cars and trucks 50% of the time, and work to access 100% renewable energy. Achieving those 3 goals will really help us transform our future to a more sustainable and more livable San Francisco. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to be here in Barcelona. I'm from a little town in Africa called Stellenbosch. I'm an undercover African. Yeah, so that's about 35 kilometers away from Cape Town. You all know where Cape Town is. And I would like to talk a little bit about a different perspective of smart cities. One that I feel has not necessarily been dealt with that much at this conference, and we hopefully can break that mold. So I usually tell a story, but this time I'm just going to go straight into what I'm going to talk about. The first is about global smart cities and the concepts and the massive opportunity that it represents. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about Africa and where Africa is on that map and what the opportunities are for Africa. And then I'm going to give some examples of the Stellenbosch Innovation District where I work. So first of all, we feel that smart cities are very much a developed world concept. When we look at the criteria for smart cities, we talk about smart governments, healthcare, smart buildings, smart mobility, smart infrastructure, smart technology, and smart energy. Together and collectively, a recent report that came out by Frost & Sullivan suggested to be a 3.3 trillion market opportunity. That's huge, okay? But the big problem is, you know, where does Africa fit into this? If we look at those segments, this is also a report done by Frost & Sullivan, it's a huge opportunity within the next 15 to 20 years, okay? I don't want to dwell on this too much. So if we look at the map of investments on a global scale in terms of clean technology, Africa doesn't feature. In terms of infrastructure investment requirements, Africa requires about $90 billion each year. Currently, we're spending only about 20%. What's required is about 40% investments in new infrastructure. And what kind of infrastructure is that going to be? This is really important questions. So I'm going to give you some examples of some of the challenges that we have in Stellenbosch, in our town. We have a very much a first world infrastructure in South Africa, but we also have this rapid urbanization. And we have some incredible social challenges with all the influx of people moving to the cities. And Africa actually has the fastest urbanization out of all continents. And if we look at the social fabric around these challenges and the places and spaces where they live, we desperately need to take up this challenge in terms of alternative infrastructures, because the current systems that are in place are not efficient and not adequate to solving a lot of these problems. So housing, as I just shown you, sanitation is another major problem that's going to impact on the health of millions and millions of citizens in Africa. Inequality is probably one of the biggest problems in South Africa. We have one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world. How are smart cities and our planning for future smart cities actually going to take up this challenge? So we, as the Stellenbosch Innovation District, which is the town itself, we would like to become a smart test town where we can actually implement and crowd in all these kinds of solutions in base of the pyramid. So my talk is really about how do we be smart at base of the pyramid. So these are some of the things that happen in these townships. These people basically build their houses out of wood. There are about 15 families a day that move into one informal settlement. And if a stove gets knocked over, they all get burnt. All of these houses get burnt. So this is a solution that we've come up with together with the University of Stellenbosch, is fireproof housing, but it's also an off-grid solar home. And you're able to buy electricity through your mobile phone. So these are different kinds of technologies that really enable people as well, because they're able to do their homework at night where they previously couldn't, or they could plug in their laptop. And these do-it-yourself shacks, as they're called, are really quite cheap. They range from about $500 to $1,000 depending on how much energy you require. This is another system which slots into this. It's actually a battery that gets charged in the day, and then at night you can take it to your shack and you can charge your cell phone. So this is how we see technologies arising in the African continent. But what's really interesting is the business model around it, and that's about social franchising. If we go straight into the communities and tell them what to do, it's really difficult to get uptake in the communities. It's more about providing a solution in collaboration, but not as selling to the community. It's more about creating a system where people from the community buy into a business, and that's where we talk about social franchising. And with social franchising, there's also a learning mechanism where people can learn and become a franchisor themselves. So this is another example of food. And food is really important. Nutrition is really important for people right at the base of the pyramid. So one of these hubs creates about 14 jobs, and it actually, instead of waiting for the vegetables to grow, the hub itself grows the vegetables beforehand, and then they distribute it. So she becomes a distributor and creates 14 or 7 hubs around her, and then they can replicate that process. Okay, this is another great example of a base of the pyramid innovation, more technological, which is about innovation in education. So this contraption actually downloads educational content at night, which is a lot cheaper. And these contraptions are placed at the various schools, and they're also able to buy airtime for your cell phone. So it becomes an attractive location to go and download educational tools. This is also a business. So after about 10 selling the sale of 10 of these, you will break even. This is a more of a top of the pyramid resource from the university, but focused on base of the pyramid as well, and focused on sustainability. This is a concentrated solar system, which eventually looked like this, which has the potential to replace small-scale nuclear pebble bed modular reactors. This is another fantastic innovation. This is really about maggots that eat waste. And they can even eat, I know it sounds disgusting, but human waste, and process human waste, which becomes fertilizer. And the brilliance around it is that the maggots become food for the chickens that you eat one day. And why is this sustainable? Because 60% of the fish in the sea and their body parts eventually become fish meal, which land up in the chicken feed, which is protein. So this is a completely sustainable, revolutionary method of protein. Here we have another sustainable technology. It's about water, and water is something really, really, really important in Africa. This is a high-tech water solution with nanotechnologies, which can filter almost any water. If you look at places like Zimbabwe and the people really require water, this is a fantastic solution. But I want to jump to this slide. In South Africa, as I said, we are completely disconnected societies. And if you look at these various hubs, these are the innovation hubs that are planned within this district. They are worlds apart in terms of the innovation and in terms of income. But what we're about is how do we connect these spaces as disconnected spaces to connected spaces. And this also is a fantastic model to invite the rest of the world to connect to the African continent as well. So how do we create what we call innovation districts that specifically focus on these kinds of technologies? So we've managed to get sponsorship for a massive shed. And within the shed, we'd like to crowd in workshops and engineering laboratories for these kinds of technologies in Africa. And when you speak to the investment companies, they're not interested in investing in 1 or 2 technologies for base of the pyramid. But when you talk about a brand, a solution for housing, or a solution for energy at the base of the pyramid, then investors are quite interested. So what we plan to do next year throughout the year is get sponsors together with the private sector, together with researchers, to do research on these kinds of innovations, to crowd in all the potential solutions so that we have a space for mutual learning and commercialization, of course. So in a nutshell, it's really about understanding what our challenges are and how do we use ICT to really understand the stories of people's challenges in these underprivileged communities. Their language is quite different. It's about pictures. So if we use open source information like Twitter and Pinterest and these picture-based, people can tell quite powerful stories that eventually can lead to new innovations. So it's about matching the challenges and the various resources that are available for smart and sustainable solutions. And then at the end of the day, it's about replicating this system. Imagine an Africa that has European or US and Chinese knowledge working in collaboration for African challenges or developing world challenges. how do we create nodes of excellence within Africa and then connect them? This also has the potential to become a trade platform, because at the moment in Africa, there's about 9 to 14% trade between the various countries. Within Europe, we have about 70% trade between the various countries in Europe. So that's one major challenge that we need to overcome in Africa. So it's about building innovation districts across Africa, using ICT to connect, but also having real spaces and places to connect. And that's where the smart city concept for Africa could come in handy. And this is exactly what we're trying to do in Stellenbosch as one of the first locations. We have many partners within the private sector. And next year, this time, we will have the first Smart African Cities exhibition and conference. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Well, we're just... the one before? Oh, voilà. Is it all right? Yes. Yes. Perfect. Now we're back on the track. Okay. Right.
Do you need this one?
Sorry?
Or this? You need it?
No. I just need this.
Okay.
Okay. So what is urban livability? We've been asked to reflect on the issue of urban livability and what responsibilities that it brings, how it can be advanced, and also fundamentally, is it reconcilable with plans for urban sustainability? Well, in the end, we're talking about integrating two potentially integratable concepts. Let's call our holy grail livable sustainability for the sake of argument. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm a cultural historian, and I'm not sure that you can fully measure livable sustainability so narrowly across very many different variables. But I do know that as citizens in the world, we need to feel that livable sustainability really exists for each and every one of us. Last year I published my latest book, Master Planning Futures, and it was based on 4 years of global analysis of different citizen towns and regions across the world. And basically my argument was that while the master plan had been the 20th century's chief development tool to carry out a purely top-down, rigid division of urban space, abstracting the green field in the service of a totalizing vision. And you're all familiar with maybe the words of Corbusier and so on. Now, today in the 21st century, the mix of economic, political, cultural, ecological, and climatic challenges and threats today demand adaptive plans capable of building resilience and social equity in a context of growing urbanization, livable and sustainable for all and not just the few. My argument is that if there is to be an enlightened approach to land use as a resource in the service of all-round urban livability, what we really need to pay closer attention to and learn from are the innovative processes of progressive urban design and planning projects across the globe, and both in the developing world as well as in the developed world, as Pieter's talk has already completely underlined. These represent very fruitful and multidisciplinary design readings and adaptations of socio-spatial environments inherited by today's communities. So whatever the challenge, going back to that Carlsberg site, which has now been sold by Carlsberg to another buyer. Let's hope it gets developed. Post-disaster, slum retrofitting. We have slum retrofitting. There are any number of slums from Dharavi in Mumbai to the different favelas in Rio and Sao Paulo. Reuniting the riverbanks of the city and its people. For example, the challenge is to create places that are supportive of human beings, not abstract blueprints imposed from above by narrowly conceiving the city as a product without a love for diversity in urban ecosystems and how best they can be harnessed. My book also reflects on modes of achieving resiliency and active citizenship in adaptive planning of urban environments. And one of the responsibilities urban livability brings is effective communication and responsiveness about resilience. Here is a brand new, some images from a brand new campaign which the architects, the Dutch architects OMA, have just launched, demonstrating the literal possibilities with their new flood risk guide produced for Barack Obama's Hurricane Sandy rebuilding task force this autumn. It not only proposes to repurpose Times Square billboards, here you can see them, but also to redesign to better manage the data interfaces of communication and decision-making. We are seeing now also the emergence of participatory placemaking. I totally agree with the British urban theorist David Harvey that spatial order, in the end, cannot control history and process. Better instead to provide adaptable frameworks based on principles that are worked out with local communities. The locals were invited to vote for example, the fast-track regeneration master plan forged by Elemental in just 100 days for the coastal city of Constitucione in Chile, hit by both earthquake and tsunami a couple of years ago. So just to give you a blast from the past, how it used to be with urban plans, Corbusier was largely responsible for many in the 20th century that we decided we really didn't in the end find very livable or sustainable. Three very decidedly top-down plans. Baron Haussmann's plan for Napoleon III in the 19th century, Le Corbusier's Plan Voisin of 1925, and Brasilia in Rio by Lucio Costa from 1956. Everything in its place and a place for everything, or maybe not. So, coming straight up to today, politicians love their photo opportunities, particularly in the first completed phase of Masdar City, the emerging eco-district in Abu Dhabi designed by Foster & Partners for a certain sector of specialist cleantech staff. It's a hard-bordered concept, to be totally honest. Does the city really need to end up with such defined enclaves like this, leaving public space denuded? Probably zones with a better range of industries and a wider range of industries and better landscaping and outdoor amenities would in the end be more livable as the eco-district, let's say the Skolkovo Technology Park in the greater Moscow region has not yet been realized, but it demonstrates that there are potentially possible amenities and landscaping facilities that could be shoehorned into the concept. But I do believe that the eco-district as a species of urban in neighborhoods is not really sufficiently advanced for us to evaluate it from a quality of life point of view. Just going back into the past again quickly, Corbusier's late modernist city of Chandigarh in the Punjab in India, low density, heavily planted, a beautiful mix of formal buildings and parklands, widely acclaimed and now fast becoming a global hub of IT services. It's got inevitably a lot of unplanned as well as planned urbanization and traffic congestion and environmental pollution that affects many cities in the global south as well. Two academic research teams from TU Berlin and University of Washington's Chandigarh lab recently concluded that the city needed a much better relationship with its peripheral edges and also to the region overall. And Washington's lab in particular is studying how the new master plan being forged in response to these pressures can relate growth in a compact way to infrastructural developments to avoid everything going forward in an ad hoc fashion, which is all too common. Because in the face of urbanization, for livability in a sustainable future, we need to consider city and region in relation to one another much more closely and strategically as parts of a dynamic synergy. Here is Big's Loop City proposal for Copenhagen. Whereas the earlier Finger Plan of 1947, which was after the Second World War, which was designed by the Danish architect Stiel Eiler Rasmussen, that was about connecting the suburbs with the center of the city. Loop City, by contrast, is a cross-border plan connecting Sweden and Denmark, creating a whole ring of light rail with 11 highly differentiated urban nodes around the Øresund region. So occupying the same space as the entire city, the ring is similar in size to the whole of the San Francisco Bay region and includes work clusters. The framework plan, if you care to go on the net and check out the beautiful video that Big has made about it, which is also quite amusing about sustainability, which always makes it worthwhile. Strategies for energy exchange, waste management, water treatment, electric car stations within the whole bounds of the centerless metropolitan area. And all, in my view, offer a very credible plan for a dense, sustainable and recreational development of the whole area. Now, cities and regions suffer very much from rigid and outdated, anachronistic zoning and planning laws. There's a whole heap of outdated legislation that is holding back a more adaptable use of urban space. The architect Teddy Cruz, moving on here. The architect Teddy Cruz, I move on quickly from this one in the middle. Yes, the architect Teddy Cruz mainly works on both sides of the San Diego-Tijuana border. Here he creates scalable templates adaptable to changing uses of space. In terms of his method, in terms of proceeding in terms of buildings per acre, he gives priority to the idea of generating economic, social, and cultural transactions per acre. And there is a big difference between the two. So one very key emerging theme being participatory placemaking, which is a force that is now unstoppable, I believe, combined with crowdfunding, which is coming on. Crowdfunding increasingly bringing local public space projects to some funding, which can then be built on by other funds. Working with an NGO Casa Familia, he created a series of monthly workshops with the locals, a new type of affordable housing concepts for the residents in San Isidro. In the discussions, he challenged their local conceptions of building density, of community, communal space and financing, leading both them and him to work together and redefine housing as nested scales of interaction on political, economic and social levels. So the resulting prototype was a hybrid of senior citizen housing and childcare facilities with collective kitchens, gardens and a farmer's market, including co-working spaces and a weekly program of activities devised to make best use of the hybrid spaces throughout the whole course of the day. And the plan also included proposals for alternative zoning categories going hand in hand with urban design, dealing with the physical. So you have the legal and the physical going hand in hand, relating the city's actual density, relating to the city's actual density and citizens' actual income levels. So what you have is fresh research, up-to-date demographics being used. These are key drivers behind some of the best architecturally adaptive plans. So architectural activists also challenging prevailing standards for building suburbs, which is not a generic category by any means, not just with their words, but with detailed design proposals. And probably what I will quickly say now is going to complement what Pieter has said about Stellenbosch from a different perspective. Michael Hart, who's an architect and urban planner working in Johannesburg in South Africa, sees and has seen for many years, all to his chagrin, a continuation of car-oriented planning, in spite of the fact that the irony is car ownership is very low, and there's a neglect of alternative energy solutions around in the thinking of urban planning, or let's say the developers, unfortunately. So urban design has been carried out in South Africa for many years, but is not taken very seriously in the restructuring of cities, with extreme exceptions like Pieter's project. In spite of the influence on the part of architects of thinkers from the United States like David Crane and Kevin Lynch. So as a result, the challenges of urban sprawl and the realities of dormitory townships with huge residential areas but without mixed use are very, very major, well after apartheid has ended. So for his new, the framework plan which he was provided to developers speculatively and is still in discussion with them, for the new mixed-use greenfield Cosmos City Extension 17 township, a new concept for a township in Johannesburg. Hout actually sat down and devised his own family of criteria, SEEDE, Social, Economic, Environmental Design and Engineering, to accompany a physical design plan. It's a design-driven housing development with pedestrian-friendly precincts, mixed-use nodes, encouraging a hybrid work-live environment influenced by the Dutch Woonhof concept, Woonhof meaning literally living streets, of roads shared with public spaces. So that enables secure and safe public social space for children to play, for nighttime gatherings, any number of different meetings. And centrally placed parks are flanked by social and community buildings and row housing, avoiding a potentially isolating and sprawling tapestry of McMansion-type dwellings. Now, I just want to summarize quite quickly because there's more material here, but let me just move on. Just a couple of minutes. London, I just want to finish off by referring to my home city of London, which has grown in population annually since 1988 and is expected to continue its steady growth for decades. In 2007, there were 7.6 million people, divided between 3 million in inner and central London and 4.56 million in the outer boroughs. Our city has advanced many transport infrastructure initiatives, including Crossrail, to improve connectivity and reduce travelling times between home and work. But just really very briefly, it's not doing nearly enough to create sufficient quantities of new build housing which is affordable. And an emerging model is shared equity, where you buy half of your project, the building, and you rent the rest, or the flat, to cater for an existing demographic, let alone future residents. So I just want to refer to one very imaginative example which came way before the economic crisis. Piercy Connor decided to design a micro-flat pod design concept, which was a prefabricated studio flat with just 30 meters of floor space, square meters, and 5 square meters of cupboard space. And they gained international media coverage for the whole notion, estimated at only £100,000 to buy, the price of a garage in the West End today. So after installing the prototype in the window of Selfridges department store, complete with a young man and a young woman who lived there for 24 hours, the architects approached supermarket chains to get permission to build their microflats on top of stores, who are increasingly opening smaller branches in central London. I just would like to just finish the example because I think it's important. Coming to the present day, what are we seeing in the UK? Supermarkets are, in fact, now starting to develop housing over their outlets. That is an incredible movement forward. Just to summarize, I think that master planning and framework plans, however large or small they can be incredible guiding tools based on principles rather than rigid blueprints. And we need the enlightened systems thinking of progressive architects and engineers aimed at incremental change over the long term, working with alliances across the public and private sector. We need to ensure that livable sustainability is not just about greenwash propaganda, but actually relates to humanist imperatives. We need to uphold the ideal of the city as a place of rights and meaningful social relations, a place where sanctuary and sanity, communion and eco-friendly living, beneficial in the present and the future, can play their full role. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to overshoot the time. I'm recovering from a cold, so my health is not 100%, and I apologize.
Hello and greetings from New York City. I'll try to be fast. So Terreform 1 is a non-profit design group where we spend a lot of time thinking about the ecological future of cities. And here is our vision on the cover of Popular Science. This is not our drawing, but it describes the idea of a tall bioclimatic building interconnected in a dense core, freeing the land formerly dedicated to suburbs and now becomes a productive green space, canyonated transportation, separating fast from slow traffic and pedestrians, and finally going in the air in bumper buses and jetpacks. We discovered this idea was nothing new. Over 100 years ago, Harry Pettit drew exactly the same visions. Tall, interconnected building, canyonated transportation, in this case separating horse carriages from automobiles and pedestrians, and finally going in the air in dirigibles connected to vertical cores of transportations. So, what do we say? This is my friend Kevin Pratt put it most eloquently. He said, we cannot get anywhere in life if you don't imagine it first. And that's what we do at Terreform 1. So, who is responsible for these cities of the future? We decided that we have to start a new profession of urbaneers. These are multidisciplinary advocates who regenerate, pioneer, and sustain the future of urban realm. And it's everybody's responsibility. Here, what we imagine, all these people from different professions working in Manhattan as people work in a Ferrari, and we are often asked, who is the perfect urbaneer? So imagine if Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses were married. Very unlikely because these two were arch enemies, but history has known worse marriages. And if they produced a child, that child will be somebody like Frederick Law Olmsted, who would be the perfect urbaneer, possessing the keen sense of community from Jane Jacobs and the magnitude and achievement of Robert Moses. And this is a very complicated diagram explaining the profession, and it's basically merging of different disciplines, and the real discovery occurs between disciplines. So in order to educate these future urbaneers, we decided to start a school. So One Lab, it's a New York school in design and science that we founded 5 years ago in Brooklyn, New York, where we are practicing this alternative approach to education. It's do-it-yourself, hands-on, learning different technology. And here it's Dr. Oliver Medvedik teaching the principles of synthetic biology to architects, learning parametric design through shapes, growing mushrooms into building blocks, and finally working with living matter. Here students are pleating living trees together into a structural wall and using phytoremediation to purify water. Here our students designed this phytoremediation chamber that we are currently installing on roofs and testing it with Yale University School of Forestry to prove that you can filter rainwater using plants and convert it to drinking water. And we had this vision to take the One Lab idea around the world, first in Europe and then globally. And I'm proud to announce that today we are starting 3 schools here in Barcelona and in Berlin and Prague. This is in collaboration with the Council on International Educational Exchange, or CIEE. They're one of the oldest NGO in US dedicated to taking students from around the world and sending them to different places. So here in Barcelona, we are partnering with the Institute of Advanced Architecture in Catalonia. Students are arriving this January, as well in Berlin, Prague, and in New York City, where we are just moved our studio to the Brooklyn Navy Yard. This is 300 acres of industrial space where they used to build big battleships. And we are converting this old factory into this collaborative design and fabrication space where we're going to mix students with entrepreneurs and bring the most advanced technology for both students and designers to test it, to learn, and to know how to design with it. We'll reach out to the community, we'll organize many talks and classes there, and we decided not to wait. This building is going to open by the end of 2014, so we moved next door in a temporary space called New Lab Beta, and this is our new 3D printer that was given to us by EOS. This machine can print anything from rubber all the way to carbon fiber. So you can print cranial plates, you can print building materials, building blocks, and machine parts. And we put together this collective of different professionals who are working in this space together using all this technology. Ecosystems are designing this modular furniture using reclaimed wood. These are kinetic furniture by Jessica Banks. Ed Jacobs is an industrial designer who designed these solar collectors. And here is this is an experiment to prove that you can bring sunlight underground. This is in the development of a new park for New York City called the Low Line. You all heard about the High Line. So now we are converting this abandoned subway station into a park. And this experiment was able to prove that we can support photosynthesis underground. Marcel Butter, architect, graduate of MIT Media Lab. He became a serial entrepreneur. He invented the first ergonomic baby spoon called Spoonie, designed and manufactured at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Here, it's my partner, Joachim, and I working on future cities. And finally, Oliver Medvedik, who built a bio 3D printer, being able to 3D print living cells. And we hope that in the future we'll be able to grow living watches, let's say. And why is this important? Because we're bringing all these people together under one roof, because innovation doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when people are together, they exchange ideas, there are serendipitous interactions. So very quickly, I'll show you our most recent research project, where we're looking at the population explosion. You all heard the numbers. The world will reach 11 billion people by the end of this century. more than 3/4 of us will live in cities, and this is an unprecedented condition in human history. So where are these people going to go? Nobody is thinking about the shape and the impact these cities are going to have in the future. We started looking and collecting data and mapping it, and this is one interesting fact, that more people will live inside this circle than outside of it. And we turned to Buckminster Fuller for help. This is what it's called the Dymaxion projection. He unfolded the world this way 70 years ago to prove that all the continents are actually interconnected, all the landmass. So what we did, we superimposed the population growth, and we discovered these hotspots where these mega cities are going to occur in the future. In addition to that, what he did, he proved that if we can have one energy grid connecting the whole world. So we can use the sun and connect the daytime and nighttime hemispheres and supplement it with wind and geothermal, and you can power the whole world, distributing resources if you do that. So here is our BioCity map that we built, showing on one side, this is the digital parametric design, and what we unfolded and superimposed the data, we're seeing that, in fact, this will be one city of 11 billion people working, living together. Here are our urbaneers that are in training, that are working on this model, and here is how it's suspended, ready to be shipped. Actually, it's currently on display in Rotterdam at the new museum, if you want to see it. And so this is one side of the map. On the other side, however, what we decided is to turn into bacteria, because digital parametric design is based on principles derived from nature. So here now we are using genetically modified E. coli bacteria, and we are putting in a petri dish, superimposing, studying the 25 most dense populations, parts of the world, and we are growing this bacteria. It's engineered to express fluorescent light under long wave UV. So here are the 25 areas that we grew in plates. Here is just to show you the area of Istanbul, and then here it's how we now have a bioparametric model, because actually we're speculating that you can study the bacterial growth and predict population growth. So this is the BioCity map suspended in Rotterdam, and we hope that by doing this research we can answer the question, how can we make the world work for 11 billion people without causing environmental damage or disadvantage to anyone? Thank you very much.